Hey friends, let's talk about customizing clothing by height. Whether you hand make your own clothes, you are a buyer of handmade clothing, or maybe you actually have a clothing business yourself, I'm about to serenade you with all of the reasons why you might consider choosing customized handmade clothing by body height. I'll tell you more about why I do this when I'm cutting out my sewing patterns, and you'll even see how actually adding a little bit of friction to the pattern cutting process and the customer's buying process adds immense value to my clothing. So I'm 5'1", and there's a lot of things in my life that just weren't meant for me. There's a lot of things that aren't sized for me, like airplane seats. Just the ergonomics of pretty much all seats aren't for someone my height, and clothing is no exception. Pants are always way too long, and dresses often, like the curves on them, any tight-fitting dresses, the curves are in all the wrong places for my body proportions. And so I'm very frustrated by this, and I noticed that there are plenty of tall people who are also super frustrated by this. So anecdotally, it's an issue that all clothes are made for the same maybe average height of person. But I wonder, like, what percent of us aren't the average height, right? So I looked it up, and the 2008 census data for both men and women, we're going on a gender binary here. For men and women, about 30% of people are actually under the average height, and about 30% of people are over the average height for the respective men and women's height. So that means that at least 60% of people aren't the average height. So I'm guessing about 60% of people aren't exactly happy with how clothing is fitting them. And proportionally, there is a really big difference for what a shirt should look like for someone who's 5'1" versus 5'6" versus 6 foot tall. So I want to show that to you real quick. Here is the actual difference between proportionally to body size. Here's for someone who's 5'1", 5'6", and 6 foot tall. Now, if the base was the person who's 5'1", someone who's 5'6" would need an additional 2 inches added to the length of that shirt. And someone who's 6 foot tall would need an additional 3.5 inches added to the bottom of that shirt for it to proportionally hit them in all of the right spots. So I think it's pretty visually clear that sizing by height is super important. All right, so something I think is super interesting as far as feedback from my customers is, I'm not so sure how much people are taking their height and their custom body measurements into account in the shopping phase, and how much is going to impact how much they love their clothes. But in the end, it makes such a difference. So here's what I mean. When my customers are surveyed right after their purchase, the day after, I send a survey to their email, and one of the questions on it is, why did you choose to buy from my shop? And I went through my hundreds of responses the other day, and I was thinking, I'm going to talk in this video about how many people choose my shop because it's custom size, blah, blah, blah. And I actually went through, and almost no one talked about that they chose my shop because of it being custom sized. No one mentioned the height aspect of it at all. I think one person out of probably 100 responses said, I'm looking for clothes as a short person. But no one else did. What was most strongly mentioned was that people were really shopping their values, that I was a handmade business, woman-owned business, that it was eco-friendly, biodegradable, the materials are great. The other half of people just loved the style of the clothes, that it's earthy and simple and timeless and things like that. But no one was mentioning the height at all. And so then I was like, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't even make this YouTube video after all, because apparently no one gives a shit about it being custom sized by height. But then what was really interesting was after they received their product, the reviews are almost always glowing, specifically about the fit. So one person said, "I adore this top. The material is beautiful, perfect weight, love the natural color, sewn well, and all of the details are stunning. What I am most pleased about is the fit. Having something made to order really does make a difference. Over the moon with my first, but definitely not last, piece from Charlie Darwin." Yeah, so it goes to show, I'm not sure it's necessarily thought of as a perk right from the start, but I think in the end, it really pays off and makes it feel like a worthwhile investment. Now, you might think that a downside would be that it takes me more time to make the product, or it's just another thing to put on the to-do list of the customer who's buying the clothes from me. But I'm gonna dispel both. So here's why it's no big deal on my end. So because I'm a handmade and made to order shop, it is barely any extra work for me. I'm not creating anything in advance of getting these people's body measurements. When an order's placed, I look at that person's height and do some simple calculations about body proportions of torsos and legs and arms, and I add that calculated length on in a matter of seconds. I have a little calculator that does this for me that I've put together, and if you're interested in that, it's going to be featured in my upcoming sewing pattern, my first one that I'm ever putting out. So stay tuned for that. All right, now here's where it gets interesting. For the people who are investing in these clothes, I actually want to add just a tiny bit of friction to their checkout process. Now, this is a very, I'd say, anti-capitalist approach to making sales, making profit, growing my business, but from the slow, sustainable fashion side of things, I really think this is important. So I offer as many free resources as I can for making the customization by height process as simple as possible for my customers. I offer a printable tape measure that they can download and use at home if they don't already have one, and I offer a really simple, comprehensive video tutorial and written instructions on how to take your body measurements as far as your bust, waist, and hips. But all that being said about making the process more simple and frictionless for my customers, I do think it's okay to make sure that their purchase is really intentional. So I want to reduce any risk of impulse shopping, because that's not great for the environment to own a bunch of things that you didn't really need or want that bad in the first place. And I want to reduce the risk for the customer of having any buyer's remorse. My clothing isn't supercharged clearance sale knockoffs that's like no skin off their back. It's also a little bit of a financial investment, and I'm making it to their custom size, so I really want it to be a piece that they're gonna reach for over and over again in their closets, not something that they instantly regret buying because it's 3 a.m. and they're feeling insecure and they're thinking about all the ways that they could become cooler if they just had this one linen dress. So I like it to be an intentional purchase for my buyers for that reason. This person is going to be making a conscious investment and gets to really be now a part of the making process with me. So from a business perspective, I'd say the downsides are that it really feels like you're not going to be able to take returns. And so who's going to want to buy from you online if they can't return the clothing? But I'll say that the benefits really, really genuinely outweigh the risks in this category, because you're much less likely to get returns when the clothing fits the person right the first time. So I want to talk a little bit about return rates. Clothing, I looked it up online. Clothing has the highest return rate of all product categories, probably no surprise. When I look at Amazon stats, it says here that up to 40% of apparel is often returned, Whereas for my small business, I have a 2 to 5% request for alterations rate. Now, I completely allow returns for my shop, and I very infrequently have anyone even ask for returns because the quality of my product is so high that when people receive it and it doesn't fit them quite the way they wanted it to, they will ask for me to alter it instead. But honestly, I get these requests from only about 2 to 5% of my customers. Now, I wanted to know the reasons why people make returns to traditional stores, online or in person. And I'm wondering, is it mostly fit, like I'm proposing? Or is it surprise about the fabric or the colors or buyer's remorse, or that they got it as like a super ugly Christmas gift they didn't even want in the first place? So I Googled it, and this is one of the first statistics to come up. Almost 40% of apparel is returned because of fit issues. I'd love to know, why have you returned clothing in the past? Is it because of fit issues? Is it because the quality wasn't what you were expecting, etc.? Let me know in the comments, what is it that has caused you to return clothing in the past? So if you're considering investing in custom sized clothing, I just want to say I think it's 100% worth it, whether you're buying from me or someone else entirely. I don't care. Just consider it to be a great investment. And if you're a maker yourself and you buy digital sewing patterns, I encourage you to ask the pattern maker about what height they created that sewing pattern for, and then adjust accordingly. So I mentioned earlier in the video, I do have an Excel spreadsheet that I use that makes pretty precise calculations based on human body proportions for how much you should adjust a sewing pattern based on your height. And so if you're interested, I have my first PDF sewing pattern coming out soon. I'm super excited about it. And that resource, that Excel spreadsheet with the calculator, is going to be included with that PDF sewing pattern. So do go ahead, subscribe to my newsletter below so you can get added to that list of when that pattern comes out. Now, if you liked this video, go ahead and like it below. And if you want to see future information and fun stories from me about life as a seamstress and a clothing brand and eco-conscious and textile art and blah, 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 please go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye!